quirky. Let's get quirky. What is up, man? We are glad you are here. Let's get quirky live. My name is James Thorne. I am founder and chief people officer of Quirk Advertising, and we've started this Let's Get Quirky Live channel really for you, because my life motto is I'm always one person away from changing the course of my future. And we've had to find a new way to connect with people, and we decided, why not do this online thing and find other ways to connect, because literally everything I've built up to this point or been a part of, or anything I'd say has been a tremendous impact of connecting with people, as many people as I can. And that's created this company, the people that are in the company, and then all the people I get to interact with. So that's why we're doing this. We're really excited, and we've had a lot of fun bringing some people on, because that's what it's about. And I'm excited about today. This 1 minute delay, I need to tell you, there's a 1 minute delay on this thing. So we're in your future. Future's looking good. But if you have any comments and you leave them and you don't hear from us in a minute, it's probably why. But just leave some comments, questions if you have throughout the entire thing. I'll make sure to get to them at some point and get that also during our interview. But join us every Thursday at 3 p.m. because this is when we go live, and you can do it and ask questions with us live. But no worries. I know a lot of you like to watch at the own leisure of your own time, so we put this on YouTube for you. So you can go to our YouTube channel, Let's Get Quirky.live. You can subscribe and catch up there, and we'll be sending emails out as well. So again, if you have any questions, let us know. But man, let's kick this off. Episode 12 today, Stoicism in Sales. What is it and how can it help me? You know what? I'm not going to be talking about this. I'm asking the questions. So I'm going to bring on my good friend here, but let's do a little fancy intro if I can pull this off. And here we go. An entrepreneur who is really focused on trying to change how people view selling, both for the prospect and the salesperson. He ran a website agency with a business partner and saw the need for sales coaching and decided to go out on his own and start a coaching and consulting business called Adaptive Growth. He now works with agencies, coaches, and consultants to make sales more reputable and scalable. Additionally, he is one of the 4 hosts of Sales Throwdown, which is a weekly sales podcast and YouTube channel discussing different personalities in sales. So without further ado, I'm proud to introduce John Hill.
Wow.
What up, man?
That was the most epic thing I've ever been a part of in my entire life.
The most epic.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much pressure now. I feel like a wrestler, and I also
in the red corner.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know if I'm prepared enough. I mean, I haven't even shaved in 2 weeks. This is crazy.
Oh man, John, I'm so glad you're here, man. Just so you know, me and John, we met through that whole motto of mine. Like, I just wanted to meet people, and we had a mutual connection, Jake on our team, that put us together, and we went to lunch and immediately hit it off. So, man, I'm just glad you got to come in today.
I mean, as far as anything is in, yes, absolutely. I'm happy to be here as well.
Yeah, it's like, well, hey, it's getting close to the end of the week. We get to wrap up, go home. Well, wait, we're already been home. Hey, man, well, tell us a little bit about the business. Tell us about Adaptive Growth.
So Adaptive Growth is all built around exactly what you said, trying to make sales outside of this realm of what a lot of people view it as, and make it something that you can do and not feel bad about, something that's easier to scale, something that's easier to track. And that just comes from, I've worked in some big corporate structures. I was a financial advisor, worked in banking, and they had these huge clunky CRMs, and no one liked them, and so no one used them. And it wasn't until I started working with my partner Jeff and the website design agency that all of that really shifted, and I started to see technology as like a good thing. And it wasn't wholly technology. There was, you got to build habits and everything else, but that's kind of where all this started.
That's awesome. And man, I want to know more about this podcast. What is this Sales Throwdown? That sounds intense too. Tell me about it.
Yeah, thank you. So there's personality in sales, right? I mean, sales is essentially a conversational process to influence someone to make a purchase. And the thing is, there's a whole other person in play. So we have to manage our limiting beliefs and mindsets and things like this and get out of our comfort zones if we're going to be successful. And depending upon where you sit on different personality charts, that means you're going to have to do different things. So we decided to launch a show talking about this personality assessment called DISC, which is, fairly popular, but it's also very easy to use quickly. So in addition to that, we sit in the 4 different sections of that assessment, right? So it's basically a quick way to group people into 1 of 4 quadrants, right? D, I, S, and C. And we have a D, an I, an S, and a C on the show. So not only do we get to talk about sales and what we're seeing and what's working and what isn't, we're also spending a lot of time of like, I have to do this way and I don't like it, and getting real-time feedback from someone else who views the entire situation differently. So it's really been fun. We've kind of had to do a remote thing as well. So we're doing ours Fridays at lunch and doing them live. So anyone who wants to tune in can, but we're also re-releasing that later on. So
cool. So live lunch, is that around noon on Fridays?
Yes.
Central Time?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And the best way to find that, would that be what?
We are at Sales Throwdown on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And, I'm here. I've commented in the thread. So if you're watching this on Facebook, you can reach out to me. I can get you hooked up with all the insider information.
Awesome. If you're watching later, we'll make sure that's in the description below.
Absolutely.
Cool. So sales, man, obviously it's coming to this point. We're going to talk about that as well today. This is something that's been a passion of yours and what's really pushed you to step out and do this full time to help others, right? You're coaching, which is a big deal. So I'm just going to start right in, man. I've got the questions. People see the title. So let's just jump right in.
Absolutely.
What do most people get wrong about sales?
So what most people get wrong about sales is they treat it as this innate ability that we're born with, as opposed to something that can be learned. Now, no one comes out of the womb asking questions like, does that sound fair? And, if we could do that, does that mean that we can move forward? So these are learned questions. These are learned skill sets. And so because of that, when you have a strong why and you know why it's important and you've got some measurability in place, this suddenly becomes approachable for people when it wasn't before. So it's not a wizard-like state. You can't make someone say yes. And people promote this idea in our culture about salespeople, which leads to the disillusion about what is really going on here. And what I have found is that we just have to kind of dial that back, right? And the more we can spread that idea, the better off everybody is, right, on both sides of the table.
No, that's good. Yeah, I definitely feel, on our end, when I got started, I am the sales guy and the marketing guy and I'm in all things, right? And then some people try to put themselves not in that category because I'm just not really a good salesperson, and you don't really have a choice. So is sales a hard job? Is that something that you would consider hard?
Yes, right. Because I'm of the firm belief, and I'm sure we'll touch more about this in a second, is that you're never really done improving in sales. Right? Because when you take a new role, the process is going to change. The way you talk about it changes. Your presentation will change and everything else like this. So don't ever look at it as something you should be complacent at. It should be a thing that you're constantly looking at. Is this idea still serving me? Is it still helping me? Is it still doing the things that I know to be important when I'm in sales conversations? And that's going to change depending upon the industry, depending upon the level you're selling at. So when you just treat it as something that I'm always looking to improve, you never get complacent, and that allows you to have more options later on.
Yeah. Would you consider yourself a good salesman?
No. No, not at all.
It's funny because people have put me in that category, and I'm just I just think I just enjoy being with people, and then I'm trying my best to make sure I'm trying to be relatable, because that whole salesy, this whole term when we write emails or we do things, I'm just I don't want to be salesy, I don't want to sound too but there's a point to it, right? We're trying to obviously, we need to make money, right?
There is a slippery slope of that becoming too much, right? And so then what happens is you end up spending too much time with people, and people talk a lot about this idea of deliver value before you make an offer kind of thing. And there's value to that, but that's marketing, right? So once the salesperson is involved and there's time invested, that information that you're going over could be putting you in a position to where you actually hurt yourself more than you help yourself. And that's why process is such an important part of this, right? When you have a process, you're not going to be as easily manipulated by your own emotions when you're on that call, right? And that's like a whole other segment. But the better your process is and the more you practice at it, the easier it is to stay within it. When you don't have that stuff, you're going to talk about anything and go off track. And, how do I feel about the thing that they just said and everything else like this?
Well, talk about for a second as far as like what would you say a basic starting point for a process is? Like what for people to understand that, because sometimes sales they don't really consider it a process more as they do an activity or something that they have to just do, right? It's part of what they do. So what would be a process?
This is where all the marketing people love me, because this is where your marketing pays double duty, right? If you have figured out your client avatar down to the point of like his name is Fred and he runs this size of company and this is their revenue and everything else like this, if you can impart that same information to the salesperson and they've got a tight solid process that is rewarding the right behaviors, then what happens is they are not attached to anybody who doesn't fit that range. So just by that very fact, you can have that time that you spend on your marketing. And I think not a lot of people go deep enough into that idea of the avatar and their journey and everything, but apply that same idea to your sales process as who do I need to be spending time with? Like who should I be talking to? Because time is the non-renewable resource here. And there's always going to be a volume element to time, which takes, there's always going to be a volume element to sales, which takes time.
No, it's good. You're pretty much calling me out on one of my weaknesses because I just love spending time with people. And I will almost say yes to any invitation for a coffee or a lunch. And I do realize my time gets more and more valuable for the company with my team, right? It's important to take care of the people that are with us. But it's hard. So maybe touch on that for a second, how would you determine yes, I understand that I can definitely kind of figure out maybe someone that would be a good fit for me in business or in life, but you don't always know. So how can you determine that maybe in some of the communications? Because sometimes people just send emails, right? They're just like trying to connect.
Sure. And that's really the hard part, right? We're talking about the time that you're saying yes to, right? Because when you're saying yes to something, you're inherently saying no to something else. So when you're spending time with people who aren't really as qualified to get it as the people in your target market who you kill it for, you're essentially saying no to spending time with the people that are in that like zone of genius. So those people are going to be better fits all the way because your social proof is going to be tighter and more relatable to them. Case studies are going to be more relatable. You can speak with more authority to that market. So the conversation shifts a little bit, and it really just defines who you should be talking to, right? Because in the beginning, you want to talk to everybody, right? If you can fog a mirror and you want to have a cup of coffee, I'll buy you a cup of coffee and we can sit down and have a conversation. But like that doesn't serve me in the business, right? So at some point, and it feels kind of cold at some levels of this, right? Because you kind of have to say, I can't spend time with these people anymore. I've got to focus on this, and I would love to spend time with you, but I can't do that right now. So maybe like a Saturday, or maybe like a happy hour or something like that. But you're either prioritizing your time or your time is all over the place, right? And that's kind of one of the first steps of a process is like, this is going to help you recapture so much of your time when you're running it well.
No, that's good. Okay, so let's scale back a little bit. How do you set yourself up? So how would you say to set yourself up for long term in sales? Like what's a good way to set yourself up?
So this is not going to be maybe groundbreaking news to most of the marketing people who are watching this, but for salespeople, they just like to be out there, right? They've got this need to be out there and around people and let's just make something happen. And there's not a lot of planning that actually takes place. And one of the things that we first do is whenever we're working with anybody, it's, okay, how much do you want to make? What does the average deal size bring in? Okay, so this means you got to sell this many deals, right? And most people don't even go that far. So what happens is they're just constantly operating in, I need more, right? And when you need more, you're not really tracking anything and you're never going to feel, complete or whole or successful, right? So first thing to do is to really get a grasp on like how many deals you need annually. And then based upon that and some math and some assumptions, when you don't have data, we can figure out how many conversations you need to be having weekly and monthly. And then at least then you can schedule around it, have time and really kind of like run that process and own it as opposed to being at its whim, which is how most people do it.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought here. So let's go back
Sorry.
let's just go back. No, that's good. I was thinking about what you were saying, and then let's go back to the title. So Stoicism. So
Yeah.
for those of you who had to find the definition of that word real quick, or Stoic was what I thought of, and then how does it tie into selling?
So my life completely changed whenever I began working at the website design agency. As far as like how I thought about selling and how I thought about myself. And that's what really kind of got me on the personal development improvement route. And that's kind of what led me to Stoicism, just in a general sense. So the big thing in Stoicism is you focus on the things that you cannot control, and you don't focus on things that you don't have any control over, because by definition, that's wasted effort, right? And to go even deeper into that, right, there's this idea that, and there's a title of a book about it, the obstacle is the way, right? So the thing that stands in the way between you and your goal is then the goal. Like, you have to get past that. And you can look at that badly, right? I don't want to do this. I don't want to cold call. I don't want to take a no. Or you can look at it as an opportunity to, okay, this is going to make me better in the long run. And I only have to do so many of these because I've got clarity about like what I need to be doing because of my process. And that makes it all easier, right? I mean, significantly easier. But the way that the Stoics looked at it was, you don't just think of an opportunity as like a bad thing and you wallow in it, right? You take action, you move around it, and you're always looking for a way through. And the idea is the stories that we tell our friends, like later on with our friends and our family and our loved ones, when you're gathered together, are never the stories about the things that went well, right? They're always about the things that didn't really go according to plan, but you got through it and now it's funny and you probably have seen some growth from it, right? So the Stoics were really big into, if there's an obstacle, like attack it head on, get through it and stuff like that. And then when you're feeling overwhelmed and it sucks, like, just remember that this is going to make you better than the other people, right? So if you're in business right now and like it's rough and you might be having the discount, you might have to deal with like a slimmer pipeline. I get it, right? You might have to make some compromises you don't really want to, but on the other end of this, when you can say, I made it through and I'm still here and I'm still open and things are good and I'm now set up to never have that again, you're ahead of the game, right? So it's just choosing about how we look at certain situations is really what I think most philosophy is in the grand scheme of things, but that's kind of my approach, because what you can, in my opinion, what I can count, I can then control. So that started for me with KPIs and then moved into Stoicism, and that's kind of where I've been hanging out ever since then.
Cool. Well, I want people to know that we're hearing them. Jake made a comment. We know Jake.
What's up, Bill?
Networking and sales are two different activities, right, John? Is what
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that a lot of people kind of view this badly. I mean, networking is very much a long play. So you have to get in there. You have to build, legitimacy, right, with these people who have been networking for a while. When we first got into the website agency, we were talking to another agency here in town, and they're like, guys, it's going to be a year before anybody trusts you. And me and my business partner were a little cocky. We're like, oh man, we're better. It's not going to be a year. And we were successful in that first year, but it was like on day 357, people were like, oh, hey, I need to talk to you about this, right? And so, I mean, that was a year, and we were seeing some success, right? So it's very much a long-term play, and selling is not the same thing as networking, right? Any deals you get from just networking should be gravy, especially if you're like operating in like a group or like a happy hour or an event or something like that. But you should be looking at it as this is an opportunity to deputize someone to go talk to all the people that I'm not talking to share my wins and my successes and who I'm a good fit for and everything else like that. When you think about it like that, it really kind of changes, in my opinion. Because I also believe there's kind of a karmic loop to networking. If you're the guy who's always just taking and never really giving referrals and introductions and trying to help other people out, that well's going to dry up eventually. So.
Yeah. Oh wait, hold up. Let's do a giveaway. Let's see if I can switch over here. Giveaway time! All right. I'm going to try to segue this networking into this giveaway. So, John, we've got a resource that we're giving away today. Tell us about it.
So I have been working out of the house for a while now, and I network a lot on LinkedIn, and so a lot of my connections are not local, and I was looking for ways to get deeper with them. So moved to having, digital copies, and I've kind of developed a system to keep the pipeline full, keep new introductions coming in using LinkedIn and using Sales Navigator and using Zoom or your preferred, video streaming services. So that way you can look for introductions and referrals and new opportunities, especially if you like networking and you're missing that right now.
So we've got, I just put the graphic up here. Sorry, it took me a second. Music hit again. I don't know if you caught that. I messed up there. But here's the graphic, y'all. The link is in the description. So head over, grab this resource, the Adaptive Growth LinkedIn Strategy for Generating Referrals. Grab that. All you gotta do is put your name and email in. You'll get this resource. And hey, you can connect with John, right? An easy way to connect with John, super easy. So go do that right now. Go ahead and take a second because it's worth it. But let's see here. Let's see if I can get back. All right, cool. There we go. There was our interruption. You like that?
I love it. I think that whole setup from Jake's original comment was just that way people would look at him in that bow tie in that guide, because there are photos of Jake Jordan in that guide. So if you like bow ties and you like Jake Jordan, you definitely want this guide.
Well, just so you know, I didn't set it up, but it was a perfect way to get into it. So maybe he was like, hey, push that guide. That's awesome. Okay, cool. So guys, again, if you have any questions or comments, please drop them in there. We'd love to get to them, and I'll make sure to catch them there. How important, John, let's go back. How important is your mindset in selling?
Very, very, very important, right? There's anecdotal saying, I don't know where it came from, but the idea is that sales is like 90% technical, and then the other 50% is attitude or emotion or something like that. And I believe that. The thing is that most of what makes sales difficult is between our own ears, right? It's our own head, our own perception of things. And the Stoicism for me has been really, really helpful to kind of really make sure that I'm doing the right things, right? And I'm approaching this stuff the right way, because I think that your intentions drive your actions. So if your intention is just to get paid, then the way that you sell is going to be different than if your intention is, I want to deliver value and make sure that I'm working with really like kick-ass clients, pardon my French. But if that's your intent, then you sell differently. So, that your mindset starts there, right? And then, do you feel like you provide enough value, right? A lot of people kind of reach these ceilings about talking about money. They want to move upstream. They want to start selling more because they've been successful, so they feel like they can. And there's a struggle there because, conceptually, they can't talk about money at that level, right? And that's where therapy and coaching and, like actual sales coaching comes into play. And, it's long and arduous and difficult and worth it, but not everybody has that time, right? So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to shortcut some of that process by, here are the rules to follow, right? And just follow these things. And if we do these things right, then the way we feel about it doesn't get as much in the way. So it's kind of two different ways of approaching the same desired result.
Yeah, and I would love to talk about for a second, you jumped out to be a coach in this role because of some things like this and really wanting to speak into people to help them get better. So talk a minute, because I like to hear people's passions behind this and desire. Like, you did touch on a little bit as far as the company, and I know you're doing it throughout this whole interview, but were there any pivotal pieces that were like, yes, this made me jump out, or this was because of these things, right?
Well, yeah. So this all originally starts with a love for data. I mean, the sales was always going to be in play, but what I really like is data. And with all the cool things in digital marketing, it makes it really, really clear to track attribution and what is converting and what doesn't. And it has taken marketing out of this realm of like limbo. Like, hey, let me sell you some catalog ads or, coupons and things like that, and no real tracking. So you couldn't really tell if there was an ROI and stuff like that. Is very, very difficult to, you can throw up a landing page in like 2 hours and then have traffic run into it. And you can have some real-time feedback in like a day. And like, that's crazy. You can do the same thing in sales. You just have to implement some of the software. And when we were building the website agency, we were using one CRM, and it wasn't a very good one. But they made a project management tool that we liked. And then we decided this isn't really serving us. Let's look around. And that's where we found Pipedrive, which is kind of like my first love of CRMs. And there's so much data. And with data, you can gain improvement, right? I mean, that's kind of the whole idea of let's establish a baseline. And what I found was I could tell myself these stories, but then I could go back to the data, and that was telling me, like, am I spending the right time with the right people? Like how does this tighten up? How does this improve? And data is the way to make that happen. So, I as excited as I get about like sales in general and stoicism, like data points, like that's my jam,
That's
right?
your jam.
That's my jam. And that's the key to making this outside of something that we get so fired up and too attached to, which actually hurts us, into something that we can do repeatably. And it's easier to scale, and it's easier to hire for, it's easier to track.
That's cool. We have another question, which actually ties really well with this. What resources have you used or currently use to continue your learning about sales? Which obviously there's a bunch of data you just mentioned too, but name some of those resources that you really like.
Man, I honestly, at this point, the stuff that I am reading about is kind of tangential to sales specifically, right? I'm reading a lot about how people track digital marketing and track other things, because I'm looking for clearer ways and other cool ways to track data points inside of selling, not sailing. So I do my own calls and stuff like that. We're on the podcast together, so we're constantly talking about like how to improve and stuff like that. I have some great people in my network that I reach out to. I have a coach that I work with to keep myself sharp on the conversational side, because I firmly believe that if I'm going to tell other people to not be complacent, it would be kind of crazy for me to get complacent. So but yeah, I mean, it's kind of my whole life, right? My daughter, when we're driving around and I turn down the stereo and I start to dry run a sales call, she just knows what's going on now. She doesn't even get mad that I've turned down Taylor Swift. She's just like, oh, okay, Dad, are you practicing? Yeah, practicing again. And that is super important, because the process itself will get you 90% of the way there. And that last 10% is on the person who is running the program.
That's good. Jake's getting a little demanding. You ready? He says, tell John to talk about removing emotion from the actual sales call.
Yeah. So if I walk up to you and I give you a coin and I say, James, I just want you to make the best coin flip possible and try to make it land on heads. Okay. You would spend some time and you'd be flipping that coin until you could, figure out a way to make it land on heads the majority of the time. And you wouldn't have any attachment to whether or not it landed on that, other than just kind of like a curiosity element to it, right? Can I improve this? The minute we attach money to that coin flip, right? Even if I say, hey, James, right, if it lands on heads, you get $2, right? And if it doesn't, you don't. There's already a shift in our mentality about like, oh, now let's make sure that it's not like the best coin flip necessarily. Let's just make sure that it's always going to land my side. And that shows up in selling no matter who you are, right? And so earlier I was talking about your intentions. If your intention is to get money, right? And I'm gonna show you the value in this, and you're gonna love it. And once you see the results, you're not gonna have any questions, and all these things that bad salespeople do. You're putting your whole self into that conversation, right? And so you can't take a no at all, because they're not telling your product or service no, they're telling you no, right? And that's a mindset thing, and that's much more in like the coaching realm, but it's important to think about, because with the good process, the goal of the process is to be able to grade the quality of the call in and of itself without the results attached to it, right? Are you asking the right questions? Are you in position to score, as opposed to, how well did they score?
There you go, Jake.
Yeah, take that, Jake.
I thought it was funny how you phrased it. Tell Jake to do this. Like we're friends or something. Goodness.
I know, it's weird.
Okay, so can anyone sell? Can anyone do it?
Absolutely. Now, Do you want to go through all the work to sell in all of that? Maybe not, right? The really interesting thing is that part so easy to start businesses now, and most of these business people need and want salespeople because most people don't get into business to be in sales forever. I'm just that idiot. So they're trying to not have to sell as quickly as they can, and there's a whole side of the gig economy of closers, right? People who want to work from home, they can take your calls, they can qualify, and because hopefully the process is dialed in, when those leads are coming through and they're more qualified that they're not, then you can put those people on commission only, right? So the idea is maybe you want to run a business, but maybe you don't want to be the salesperson. That's okay, right? They don't have to be as tied together as tightly as they used to be, because you can get good commission only salespeople and have them do a good job. That being said, I think it's important to develop a skill set in selling, right? Because, uh, you know, I think if you don't have those first rounds of conversations, at least like, hey, what would you see value in? It's really hard to build your offering or, dial it in or follow up to get improvement and things like that. But ideally, everybody I know is trying to recapture that time as quickly as they possibly can, so that way they can work on, growing their business and not growing a skill set inside of their business.
That's good. Obviously, with the craziness going on in the world right now, and if you're watching this later and not during the Rona right now, what are some ways that you have pivoted, or ways that you've adjusted in your sales strategy or sales, knowing that majority of us are at home right now, and like this tool right here too, to have people come live, is a way for us to connect with others and to do this now, that because we can. But what are some ways you've pivoted in as it relates to sales?
You know, for sales specifically, the I used to do all my lead generation and my prospecting on LinkedIn, and wasn't really giving Facebook much of any kind of value as far as prospecting. And then I started to get into some of these Facebook groups, right? There were groups literally for everything. Facebook pushed their groups agenda on like the Super Bowl or something. I mean, they've got a lot of weight behind it. And there's a lot of really good groups that are really focused around niches that you can hop in there and give some value to and get some conversations with some decision makers. And that's where a lot of my business has been coming from, right? It's these smaller agencies and freelancers who want to be bigger, right? They want to make that jump from freelancer to actual agency, and a big part of that for them is scaling their sales. So the groups have been really, really helpful to me for prospecting and getting into conversations with people, and trying to drive some value before I make an ask to, hey, sign up for my email list or sign up for my lead magnet, right? Because everybody has a lead magnet these days, right? Literally everybody. So this is kind of a whole other topic, but I'm curious about your ideas on this in a second, and I'll ask in a second. But the give some value first, right? Give them a reason to trust you before you make an ask, and that is kind of what social selling has kind of evolved into for me, is trying to give a little bit of value, a little bit of stuff back, and then starting it early on.
No, it's good.
From there.
And speaking of lead magnets and how to do the sales funnel, if you don't know how to do that, we actually have a DIY sales funnel on quirkadvertising.com you can check out. Shows you how to do the entire thing if you're not already into something like that. And a reminder, we've got one on the show right now. So John's LinkedIn with sales. So definitely check out that PDF. It's in the description. It's in the comments. So make sure you download that piece.
So for you as the marketer, is it okay if I turn the tables and
Absolutely.
ask you a question? So the whole idea now, right, that's been popularized is, lead magnet in exchange for email, offer, value. Here's my Facebook group, tripwire offer, and then it escalates up from there. How long do you see that continuing to be viable, or do you see any big shifts?
No, that's a good question. It's funny that you say that, because we've just made a big shift ourselves to help everyone understand how to do that. It's like we've gotten to this point where we're trying to get people to understand how to do it, but we're doing it in a way. Of course, we follow a lot of Donald Miller with StoryBrand, and that's a big part of our business. But it's simplifying it down more than what it's growing to. Like, it's not trying to make all these inner pieces. It's like, oh, someone goes here and does this and clicks and they go to a website, and then if they go to this page, they get another email, and it's like constantly just keep them on this web, right? It's more simplifying it way down to the most important pieces that we feel people need to know about that have to do with interaction, building trust, and like building trust with our business. So it's like, well, people want to know that you've done business with someone else. You gotta have some type of authority. So you're like, yes, we give them some testimonies and things that maybe it's a really good story that someone can read and attach to, or those objections and all these marketing, there's a problem solution, but there's objections and there's paradigm shifts. We just say, you know what, water it down to those things and just create a few emails based off of that and make it a real quick funnel, and then lay off, and then go to nurture stuff, or like this to us is our nurture campaign now, this live stream, and that's a way for us to engage with people, hopefully give them great content. That's a great question, because it's one of those things too, the more, and you probably feel this way, John, because I'm definitely an early adapter of things. The more that I jump into things that are new and try new stuff and come up with new ideas, I realize how far behind people still are. And not that, like you said, lead generators are still, like, it's become a thing. You go to a page and there's a pop-up and there's, it's like all these things. I think there will be a shift in that. I don't know when exactly. But I realize all the businesses that we're helping still don't even realize what that is. And they know it when they say, we explain it. They're like, oh yeah, I've been to a site that has that. But that's from our perspective right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Because and this might be a situation of me surrounding myself with people who are just like way smarter than me, right? So I kind of feel like,
which is people on my team are that way, and why I'm bringing you on. Yeah.
Well, I feel like we've been in this whole idea of like the lead magnet and all of this stuff in the pop-ups and everything else for so long that everybody has to understand it. They have to see value in it, but I guess that's not really a fair assumption, right?
Well, because it's interesting you say that, because I battled in my mind even jumping to make that a big resource of ours to get people to do more of it, but I've seen the value knowing that a company like StoryBrand, they're 10, 15 million, I don't know what they are this year, and that was their main piece that they decided to push this March, and I'm like, man, we are still, like, I'm like, what's the next thing? And that's the next thing, and we're finding ways to engage people in that way. But I think it was more so, even with StoryBrand, they have the archaic, it's been story forever. Like, we've always been telling stories since the beginning of time. We've just found new ways to do it. So this model was like, well, let's just simplify it down into a way that can be maybe more impactful and not as abrasive or, I don't know the right word, but getting in people's face or constantly just sending them communication. But it's also like, from the data that I found, emails are still one of the biggest ways to make money, and like emails still are the leading force. And I'm like, man, that thing has been been around forever, but it's like still leading. So I do think in the things that I read and keep up with, and of course when I surround myself with people like yourself, it challenges me to think more and get bigger and like more perspective. And but yeah, that's kind of where I've been at lately, because I've just noticed, like, man, and we help a lot of small, medium-sized businesses. We're not helping a ton of Fortune 500 companies, but but that's kind of been our approach lately.
So another question to that point, right? Because now every company has to have loads of content, right? And when you look at the amount of content that's produced by by any company now versus 5 years ago and 10 years ago, it is excessively huge, right? So if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like the idea to really do is to clarify that and not go for the volume approach, which is kind of different to hear from a marketer who's normally about volume.
True. Yeah, it's simplifying it. It's making everything we do way more impactful in a fewer words if we can, and in a fewer resources or a fewer tools if we can. And I think that applies, of course, when you do coaching, I'm sure, like, business coaching, and you just look at like, how can we simplify everything down to do it with the least amount possible to still make the biggest impact, and not, because I can get so bogged down with resources and things that I use because I like them. Yeah, even Chris says, I think as long as people are looking for resources, someone will always provide them. Yeah, it's true.
There's a whole $1 billion industry around that, Chris.
Yeah. But yeah, I think, it's just simplifying. It's just clarity. Our core foundations we've really been pushing lately for us, like, there's just two things: a story and clarity. Like, we've got to make those just right. And we've got to go back down to that basic foundation first before we do anything, if it's a project or it's a whole company. And Yeah, I think it's not necessarily removing that resource or way of doing it. It's just simplifying it down to make it a little more impactful.
So it's not marketing just for the sake of marketing, right? Because I think the metaphor you said a moment ago of like trying to keep them in this web of like they're constantly up in the air, like some sort of juggle with like all of the
Right.
excessive retargeting. Like I play a game at the end of the day to kind of wind down and to like stop being so ramped up, and it's this very fairly boring game, but I lose a lot at it, and it shows me these ads, and they're all these like agency coaching guru ads and stuff like this, and it's like I have not clicked on any of these yet, guys. Like stop. But eventually, I'm just gonna start helping them, hit their ad spend goals, because that's their claim to fame is they spend $500,000 a month, and well, let me help you a little bit since you can't take me out of your targeting.
Right.
At some point it just gets ludicrous, right? So
Yeah.
where do you think that line is? How
That's a good
far how
question.
far how far back do you need to go to be the person who's capturing the attention? Because that's what the content play is all about, right? Capturing attention before the buying decision is made, is my
Right.
understanding. But
Yeah, and even to that point, like we still help clients in ways that that do ads and things where we're constantly trying to get things in front of people, right? It's
sure,
part of
yeah.
being in this industry, but I think it's going back to well I'll put it this way: when we bring a client in, we are very trying to amplify their word of mouth first, trying to get that traditional piece right
Mhm.
before doing any of these tools. And then it's kind of going back down to that story and clarity, and then going to the website, then the email, and kind of building a base structure to where the things they do have control over. Um, but yeah, it's a really good question because I don't know the line. I know that for me, the way that I guess I'm just going to approach it through the feelings I do have towards it, and the ways that the research I'm finding. Um, yeah, I don't know the line. I think it's just more for us trying to do our best to put people in a good light with people and build that trust. Like trust is such an important piece, and it gets broken sometimes when you do it. But I hear all the time too, the people that we follow, it's hey, you can't necessarily over communicate things because if it's really good
Oh, yeah.
information, they're going to want to see it and want to hear it and use it, right? Like I get an email every day from some people that I do like their content, and like I will look at
Yeah.
it. It's like
Yeah.
every day. But there are some people that I'm getting every day. I'm like, I'm done with you. Like it's like that was not fun anymore.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely adding value, and I think if you're and you do need to ask people. You need to survey. You need to ask people around you. You need to find out what's effective and not. You can't just say you know it all and jump in and be like, yes, this is the way. Um, because the feedback you get, then you need to pivot and adjust and make sure you're adding value.
So look, okay, so I just launched a newsletter under my personal brand, and talks about stuff that would have been helpful to me, 4 to 5 years ago, and it's growing, but not at the rate that I want it to. But I think that the content is good. But when do you start tracking and holding yourself accountable to that idea of like, hey, maybe this formatting isn't correct and I should adjust it, or maybe I don't need to write about these things anymore because it's not being relevant. Like, how do you like you as the marketer, right? If I hired you, where would you say that sweet point is, or does it vary for everybody? And that is kind of why marketers make the money that they do.
that's 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 good. So I think I do like talking about passions as well. Like, what's your mission? Like a few weeks ago, we brought someone on and it's like it's let's focus on the mission versus the money because everything's going on right now, and he's just like we just focus
Yeah.
on what he knows he's called to do. Um, so it's like if you're really passionate about it, it's something you built your business around. You want to tell people about this thing or this service or product.
Mhm.
There's not really like to me that's hard because until you've maybe invested a lot of money and time into things, you're just like, it's just not working. Like, why isn't it working?
Yeah.
Um, but if you're starting out something, and of course you hear stories of people all the time that start these crazy things, and everyone thinks they're stupid, and then it just blows
Yeah.
up. So they've had to get their word out, and if they're passionate about it, I think go for it. Be passionate about it and tell as many people in the world as you want. Um, but but besides that, like if it's not if you've been doing this for a while, you're pouring money into it. That's kind of where we also step in as a marketing agency. Like, yes, we will make money doing work that we do for you, but we don't want to make money and you not have results, all right? So
Yeah.
it's like and you do see a lot of that in marketing. That's kind of one of our. We've actually got this little greedy weasel character that's our villain that's behind the scenes, and it's like we don't want to turn to that agency that's just taking money because we can, Because I have several
Okay.
conversations with people. I'm like, dude, I can make a ton of money on you. Like it's an always, the greed is always behind the scenes, and I think I just have that there to make sure that I don't do that. But yeah, you're right. I don't know if I know the answer as much as I know each person's different, and every time we come and we approach it that way, it's okay. What are you passionate about? What are we trying to do here? And have you already tried it? And what's worked or hasn't? And then do research around that, because we have clients right now that things aren't working, and
Yeah.
we're literally pouring more energy into finding things because they want us around, and we've been helpful, but what they're doing is not working. So we gathered other people around and try to get people that are bigger and better than us, or get some good research, and sometimes that still doesn't always work. But
So I have another question to that point, right? Because a lot of people talk about how important it is to be authentic and to not change to fit some kind of peg because you're going to come off as inauthentic and bad. But then there's also this idea that you should be surveying and you should be talking to people, and
mm-hmm.
rebrands happen and stuff like that. How do you balance those two things? Like when's the right time to do a rebrand, and how much should you be moving around inside of your persona?
That's good. Yeah, we I've got a couple clients right now that they're just like dying to change things, and I do think a brand, which as of today, it's like a brand is really what other people are saying you are, right? Like it's what other people are saying. So if it's not working and people are saying other things, and you're trying to create something just because it's what you want, then that's different. But yeah, as far as being authentic versus what you're saying, I guess, is a rebrand or just changing just because, or within, is that what you're saying, like within um, the business?
Well, I think specifically a lot of people put out these personas, right? And from like a sales perspective, you see this in networking all the time, right? You go to the networking event and the guy comes up and, hey man, how's it going? Oh man, I'm so busy, you know? And so are you really that busy? I mean, you carved out time to come to the networking event, right? So, are you really that slammed? But I think it's just so easy and natural to kind of put forth a persona, right? Some
Mm,
perceived image of what you feel like you need to be in the workplace. And I feel like a lot of people talk about, hey, don't do that, right? That's going to be inauthentic. But there's also this idea of like, hey, you got to be true to yourself because that's going to make the whole process easier. So, and this might be too much navel gazing, and you probably weren't expecting me to interview you about this
no,
kind of
it's
stuff.
definitely turned on it. Yeah, but I expected it from our first lunch because we had a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Well, to another point, I think with when you say staying true to yourself, I think a lot about like I do want to be real, and sometimes I cross that line sometimes where I'm not really being me because I'm trying to conform or match up to somebody, and even doing this live stream is good to stretch me because I'm trying to just be me and
Yeah.
not try to be someone else, right? And I can watch some other people and try to be them, but there's only one James in the world, and that's me. And so every product and service that comes out of the business owner, like ourselves, ends up being a representation of us.
Yeah.
Um, so I think to that point, like I guess I'm just thinking about like, I definitely want to be real and authentic. And I think that does sometimes is more important because people want that, and they want to know that they can trust you, and you're not going to be one thing in one place and different somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And the services and products you do, if that's not represented well, or people start realizing it's not really truly who you are, it kind of messes things up.
For sure. Okay.
So
I like that. I like that. I will accept that
you
answer
accept that?
on your show.
We got some comments during all that. Let's see, Jake. Um, okay, hold on. Let's go back. This might be some from a little further. It's a great way of someone to dip their toes in the water before committing, getting a little bit of our services without buying until they are ready. Okay. I agree with Chris. I think we'll find new ways to deliver the value, but it will still be some lead generator of sorts. Yes, simplify. Okay, great. I believe in classic attraction marketing. You let the clients tell you what they want next and deliver it. You can add automation to that, but let them tell you when they are ready for the next micro decision. Okay. Oh,
All right. So
go ahead.
let me
Sorry.
ask you this. I have a question for you, James.
Okay.
I have this idea, right? So this is like initial interest at the very, very far end here, and this is purchase, right? And what marketers want to do is they want to come from this side, right? And they want to give information and information and information. And the whole goal of the marketer is to say, let's make sure that this is going to be as hot and as valid and as qualified as possible. So that way the sales guy doesn't have to do as much. Do you agree as that as like a valid explanation of what like marketing does digitally?
I would say yes, but I have a lot of conversations with people where I'm like, you've still got to work hard for what you go and do.
Sure.
Like,
No, absolutely.
yeah, yeah, that's, I agree with that, but it's like, I've got a couple of people right now that I'm talking to, and they're coming to me to be the answer. You know, they're hurting and things aren't happening. And they're like, we need you to figure this out so we can get to the next level. And I'm like, well, it may not work if the side that you take care of on sales or even the customer service isn't effective, you
Yeah.
know, and I will sometimes not do business based off of that too. And I'm like, well, I believe what we do might work, but at that
Well,
point,
I think that's a key part of the process that everybody skips, right? That and for some companies it makes a lot of sense to skip it because it takes forever to change marketing and everything else. But if you're small and you're like paying attention, right? I kind of have this golden standard that if you lose a deal to the same thing twice, it's got to become part of the conversational process, right? So the
that's good.
salesperson has got to cover it. If that salesperson knocks out 3 to 5 deals because of that part of their process, then it's on marketing to take that over and to figure out a way to disqualify that step before it hits the salesperson. And that is how you kind of make both of those kind of polar opposites. And a lot of companies treat them as vastly different silos, and they shouldn't, can influence each other and work together. But that doesn't happen in big companies because of politics and mid-management stuff and everything else like this. But if you're running a small business, there's no reason to not take the feedback that your salesperson is having and figure out ways of qualifying around that and the marketing to make your life easier, because there's always time. I mean, time is always going to be the thing. So you can fix it in the qualifying and not have to spend it in calls, or you don't have to, and then you always got to make sure that you're taking that time in calls, which takes away time from other things.
Yeah.
So
That's good. Yeah, I think sometimes I think about, the bigger that we get, I still want to sit down in some of the basics and like get into it so I know how things are, like being able to go into, and I consider myself the sales guy for our business right now, and I've got other people that are bringing in business, but I am the main guy. I'm the chief people officer, right? I'm the one hanging out with everybody. But but yeah, that's interesting. So what are you seeing then? Because you as a coach, you're in a different type of role where you're helping people kind of get. Sometimes they're answering their own questions, right? But what are you seeing when it comes to this with people you're interacting with right now, with the clients that you have?
What I see is that most people are just grading salespeople on the outcome, right? Completely. There for a while last year, I was helping people trying to get a commission-based only salesperson part-time and to do it a different way. I've had this dream of kind of building this company for essentially like the day after I got excited about selling, right? And like, oh, wait, there's a process to this and I can work on the process and it makes it approachable. That's awesome. So then I was like, oh, what if I could sell other things for other people to make it easier for people to not have to hang out on the phone? Because I know some people with really cool business ideas, but they're so terrified of the sales aspect of it, they'll never launch it. Yeah. And it shouldn't be that way, right? Like that shouldn't be the barrier that keeps you from like potentially being like wildly successful. Like it's just a conversation between two people. Like it's just our head, our brains, our belief about it that gets in the way. So, and everybody talks about that mindset stuff, right? Like I learned it from my coaches. This is not new to me. But when our perception of it, which is another big thing in Stoicism, right? Our perception of this thing is what makes it difficult and what makes it heavy. I don't want to ask this person for the business because, I don't know if I can yet, Right. Whereas if you just have it tied to a process and you understand that like, okay, cool. If I get a no, that's not the worst thing ever because I know that on average, I need 4 no's to get to a yes. Cool. I'm one closer. Let's go. Right. It changes the momentum of it. It changes your perception of it, and that makes it easier to do.
Yeah, totally. All right, we got one more question from the group here.
Yeah.
How would you approach selling a software product without having a salesperson involved? How do you approach identifying the right customer and hitting on their pain points without ever having an actual salesperson in the process?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Man,
Right?
Omari,
You
there we
know,
go.
yeah. In the absence of data, you have to make assumptions, right? So until you have enough clients under your belt that you've really kind of identified as, oh, I thought this whole sub niche was my niche. And actually, that's not true. It's the sub niche of the sub niche that is really my niche, because that's kind of what I've done for myself, right? Was I really like sales and I really like small business and I really like marketing, but I don't really want to do it for anybody else. So let's build this kind of hybrid things that way I can help people on the sales side. I know enough about the marketing stuff to maybe be more advantageous than other sales focused people.
Yeah.
And, I've done this now the second time and we've got our own podcast that we're marketing and stuff like that. So, I am putting some of this stuff into play from the marketing side of it. And I think that at some point you wake up and you realize, oh, this is so much tighter, right? So I think you start as broad as you can and feel comfortable about it. And then, you got to get somebody to pay you, right? And then you start figuring out from them, right? Have really good client relationships. Like, what do you like? What keeps you here? What made you buy in the first place compared to the other people, right? Build that rapport, build that relationship so you can get that information because, I think that any salesperson, even when they have it dialed, is still probably spending time with people who they don't need to. Some people just can't help themselves, and then some people just feel like, maybe there's an opportunity, right? And the shoulders come up, and you start thinking about that it's hopeful and everything else. No, right? Because when you're saying yes to that time, you're saying no to time to someone else. And where do you need to put your value and your time?
That's good. That's really good. All right, we're getting close to the end here, so I want to push again the resources. So I'm going to put this graphic up again, the free resource, the Adaptive Growth LinkedIn Strategy for generating referrals. He even reshifted this and created it during these crazy times right here during the COVID-19. So click the link. It's in the description. It's in the comments. If you're watching later, it's in the description below you on YouTube. But definitely download that resource.
Real quick.
Yeah.
There are templates in there. There are screenshots. There is everything possible to give anybody who can open up a LinkedIn account and pay get a free month of Navigator to start getting conversations, right? Reach out to the people you know. Don't treat it as like a transactional site. Treat it as digital networking. Start within your range and then just be looking outward. Use the scripts, modify them for your own use, but they work. I use this all the time. So
cool. Thanks for making that.
Of course. Absolutely. Happy to do it.
What's a good way, John, for people to connect with you? So say, they want to just reach out.
Probably the best way to get a hold of me is johnsmallmountain.com is kind of my personal brand website. And that's where I spend more time talking about the stoic stuff, the personal development stuff, and the entrepreneurial stuff. I try to keep the really sales focused stuff for Adaptive Growth and for Sales Throwdown, which is the podcast that airs every week. We're recording on Fridays. But if you just have questions about business ideas or, want to just talk about anything, John Small Mountain on Facebook. It's all there. You can get a hold of me there, and you can sign up for the Sherpa newsletter, which is my weekly newsletter talking about a lot of this stuff, marketing things I like, sales tips, right? Gadgets and tech that I'm using as well to grow.
That's good. And you'll be live tomorrow for Sales Throwdown, right? At 12 Central.
12 to about 12:45 or so, right? We're all still like on the grind working. Like none of us are guru level. Like we're all still making calls, having conversations. Yeah. So sometimes sometimes one of us has to step away, and sometimes we got to call it early. But we try to pack it in about 45 minutes, questions and answers. We talk about what we're doing. I shared a funny story about completely botching a sales call recently and what I learned from it. So we try to talk about that stuff, right? We don't hold anything back.
That's awesome, dude. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Dude, this was a blast. When can we do part 2?
We're gonna. You're coming back. You didn't have a choice, so I'm gonna go to your house next if I have to. So
Let's go.
No, dude, that's awesome. Well, I'm gonna close this out. I've got a few things here. Just join us every Thursday at 3 p.m. Next week, we're bringing on Drew Rogers. Who is that guy? Well, you'll have to find out next week, and we're going to send you information about him this next week. So join us next week at 3 p.m. Drew Rogers is jumping on, and it's not Mr. Rogers, it's Drew Rogers. So stay creative, my friends, and like always, oh, and also, if you want to subscribe to this, and this is afterwards, and you're on YouTube, subscribe. You'll get notified when these come out. But like always, stay creative, and John, you're going to have to close out with a dance with us. You ready?
All right. Well, first, thanks for having me. I don't know if I said that at the
absolutely.
beginning. Huge pleasure. This was awesome. I like turning the tables and asking you questions about the marketing stuff.
Thanks for keeping me on my toes.
Hey,
Appreciate
that's what I'm
it.
here for.
All right, well, let's do this thing. There you go. That's it. That's it.
There it is. The hair's long enough that it works.